This is the Earth. This is the North Pole and this is the South Pole. This is a really basic intro to geography. But what if they switched places? Which would now be the South Pole and which would now be the North Pole? Well, spoiler alert, both of them would still be called the North Pole, which makes sense because we don't want to change anything about our maps or compasses. When people talk about the Earth's poles flipping, they're talking about these magnetic poles flipping. They don't mean the actual continents moving around. According to a study published in 2022, it happens roughly every 200,000 to 300,000 years, with the last one happening around 780,000 years ago. First off, obviously, your compass would stop working. For example, Earth's magnetic field protects us from solar winds, which are streams of charged particles flowing off the sun. After all, it's happened many times before in Earth's history and life still found a way to continue. The main problem is that the power grid relies on transformers to regulate the flow of electricity. Power companies regularly test equipment to see if it would hold up through extreme magnetic storms, which can sometimes be caused by solar winds. For example, newer satellites already have built-in atomic clocks which are resistant to magnetic disruption. And in general, we can try to avoid making our systems dependent on magnetic fields in the first place. So although a magnetic pole shift would definitely be very bad, it wouldn't be the end of the world. It might mess up your cell service for a while and you might need to bust out that old atlas of yours, but life would still go on. But an actual pole shift would be a whole different beast since it would be so slow. In this course, you'll learn about topics like electromagnetic induction and electric circuits, which will help you understand how transformers work, which we talked about earlier. Brilliant is an online learning platform with thousands of lessons in math, science, and computer science. Their services can help you brush up on things you learned in school or learn something completely new. And best of all, their courses are interactive. So instead of just watching lecture videos, you'll be solving equations and building circuits to help you learn. There's no rush. It would take thousands of years to complete. While we know it'll happen eventually, we don't know exactly when. So it's impossible to fully prepare for. But scientists do monitor the magnetic poles drift to try and get an idea of what might happen next. These transformers often have to be cooled down with oil and they are very sensitive to changes in the magnetic field. Because the magnetic field lines converge at the poles, the magnetic field is strongest there. When the poles flip, the magnetic field will be weakest at the equator and gradually strengthen as you move north or south. During this time, the strength of the Earth's magnetic field will be lower than usual almost everywhere. Geomagnetic storms could occur as the magnetic field lines get all twisted up. All of this could damage transformers and knock out large swaths of the electrical grid, leaving a lot of people without power. On top of that, if planes can't fly, roads become impassable due to downed power lines and ships can't sail, we would face a massive transportation crisis. Still, it would likely kill many animals that use magnetic navigation to migrate long distances like birds, bees, and whales. A sudden shift would leave them disoriented and lost. Thankfully, animals usually migrate over the course of many generations. So there would probably be more whales and bees around to carry on once the new magnetic north was established. These winds don't normally reach the Earth's surface, but during a magnetic pole shift, the magnetic field weakens and the solar winds can get much closer. One consequence of this is that the auroras would appear much closer to the equator. But another consequence would be that the entire planet would be hit with a wave of radiation. Suddenly getting closer to the sun's harmful rays, especially if it were to happen quickly, would expose humans and all life on Earth to higher levels of radiation than normal. Luckily, it seems like the slower the pole shift is, the better. So even though it would still be pretty dangerous, if it happened over the course of millions of years, it would give life on Earth time to adapt to the higher levels of radiation. Right now, your compass works because it is able to tell the difference between the magnetic North Pole and the magnetic South Pole. But if the magnetic North Pole was now the magnetic South Pole, then that distinction wouldn't exist anymore. And any device that uses the Earth's magnetic field to help it navigate would break or at least stop working properly. This includes the majority of navigation systems used at sea and in the air, which rely on the Earth's magnetic field to some degree. That means airplanes would no longer be able to use their compasses or some other magnetic navigation systems. But it would also make things like mobile phones, laptops, cars, and pretty much any other device that helps you figure out which way you're facing or where you are no longer function as intended. For about a week, everyone would have to go back to using physical maps. It's caused by turbulence deep in the Earth's core, which scientists think might be connected to fluctuations in Earth's rotation and the gravitational pull of the Moon and the Sun. And because it's so hard to predict when this will happen again, scientists don't know exactly why it happens when it does. But it does seem to happen fairly regularly, and it's totally natural. In fact, even though the magnetic poles can wander quite a bit, they generally stay above or below the geographic poles or very close to them. For example, the magnetic North Pole currently sits in northern Canada, more specifically at around 70.9 degrees north latitude. That's less than 3 degrees away from the geographic North Pole at 90 degrees north latitude. So when people say the Earth's poles flipped, that would mean the magnetic South Pole would start to approach the geographic North Pole and eventually become it. And then the new magnetic North Pole would form somewhere near the current geographic South Pole. But what if something made them switch places? Like what if the Earth's magnetic poles flipped? That would actually be pretty bad. Today we're answering the question, what if the poles switched? You might be thinking, how do you switch the poles? Well, the way it works is that the Earth has a big old iron core, much like you, deep inside it. And that iron is all liquid, kind of like water when it boils over. The heat from the Earth's core causes the iron to act like a gigantic bar magnet with a magnetic field extending out into space. And that magnetic field has a North Pole and a South Pole. But those aren't the same as the geographic North Pole and South Pole. Those are just where the lines of the magnetic field converge. And for the most part, those two sets of poles match up really nicely. This is why your compass points north, but it isn't actually pointing to the geographic North Pole. It's pointing to the magnetic North Pole, which happens to be very close by. They are currently only about 11 degrees apart, which is not nothing, but also means that we often treat them as being the same thing. But the magnetic poles can move around, and they do. And this is important to understand. And it turns out that this does happen, just not super often. So what would happen if the magnetic poles flipped tomorrow? It turns out quite a lot. If the pole shift happened quickly enough, it could cause even bigger problems than that. It also won't wipe out all electronics or cause the internet to go down globally. And it's not like the whole power grid would collapse or anything like that. To some extent, engineers already plan for this. The good news is that we can prepare for future pole shifts by making sure our satellites and other navigation systems are future-proof. If you liked learning about what would happen if the Earth's magnetic poles switched places, then you might enjoy a course called Electricity and Waves, part of the larger physics sequence on Brilliant. Thanks for watching and learning with us.